when he was 18, 19, and said, I graduate high school this year and I don't know what I want to do. My parents want me to go to college, but I don't know if I want to. So we went to lunch a couple weeks later and I said, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you the pros and cons of all these different choices and then you can decide. So we talked about college, we talked about entrepreneurship, and then he came back a week or so later and said, I think I want to give entrepreneurship a try. And he says, well, you make good money, you have freedom of time, and I see that you have a good relationship with your family. And I said, okay, if you're going to do website marketing, you can't do that until you understand how websites work. So you first need to learn how to build them. And so I told him, spend the next 6 months to a year learning about web design. So he started self-teaching him and learning just through YouTube videos. And when he knew the basics, I said, now go start selling websites for free. So he started doing that, started making money. Fast forward a year, and now he's charging full price for websites. So 3 years later, he's 22 and he makes $10,000 a month and quit his day job about 4 months ago.
Welcome to Reach. This is a show for podcasters who are not only trying to grow an amazing show, but they actually want to make money. I'm excited to share with you the secrets that I've learned along the way, as well as introduce you to some amazing guests who are going to really help you take your show to the next level. I'm your host, Brunson Smith. Let's dive in. I met Damon at this really cool event, and we just started talking, and all that kind of blended into this question of how do you help kids be successful, and how do you make them hopefully become self-sufficient and teach them good lessons about entrepreneurship and about how to take care of themselves while at the same time not giving them too much and then having the money ruin them. Yeah, that was the context that we went into this, but I would love if you'd share just some of the cool experiences you've had with your kids and with entrepreneurship and helping them be successful already. What kind of cool things have you guys done?
Yeah, there's a lot we can cover, and there's been a lot of updates even since we chatted. I'll give
cool.
a quick background as well, just to give the listeners a little bit of context. So I run an agency for 17 years, built it into doing a few million a year. And so when we talk about financial stability, that's a little bit of the context. And like you came from, I don't know if I came from lower middle class, alcoholic stepfather, things like that. And so those are part of what we got talking about. And so when I was younger, it was like, okay, how do I avoid all those things when I become older and when I have a family? And so I started to pay attention to basically reverse engineering, or what are the opposite of things. So the opposite of not having disposable income and, like you said, things given your way is financial stability. Okay, so then you start focusing on what's involved with financial stability. So that's just a little bit of context. And so now that I have that financial stability, I have 3 kids, been with my wife for 20 years. We've been married for 17. And so, yeah, it's like you said, it's almost like a full-time job going, okay, how do you provide a better experience for your kids and a loving household while also not spoiling them? And some of the fun things that we've done is I take my kids to youth entrepreneur events. They travel with me in general. If it's more than a 24-hour thing, I'll usually check them out, bring them with us. One entrepreneur event that was specific for kids, at the time my one son was 7, and he came home and was inspired and wanted to start selling stickers, and he made $2,500 in 6 weeks at 7 years old selling stickers. What I'm working on now, one of the things that I said as an update since we talked, is my 13-year-old. He had an opportunity where there was a class that contradicted with what's interesting is when your kids get older and they start getting into school, you start to see the curriculum and the standardized curriculum where it's there's not a lot taught about entrepreneurship, and there's not a lot taught about critical thinking. There's not a lot taught about how to balance your finances. And so as my kids have been exposed to all these cool things that we do and meet other people that have had success and freedom of time, and they start to see the standardized curriculum that boxes your mindset in, now they're starting to question it. And so that's been really interesting for me to see that my kids start to develop that awareness of these imposed limits that other people don't realize, that society, whether it's intentional or not, doesn't help you think to do bigger and better things. And so he started to have this internal conflict about not liking the paths that were discussed in school, which was effectively go to college, get a job, the end. Those were the only options. And so there's nothing wrong with college and there's nothing wrong with the day job, but he started talking to his teacher about, what if I want to start this business and I want to do this cool thing? And he just
Right.
started getting shut down. And so that was defeating for him, where there weren't other ways that they would talk about. And so we chatted with him and his counselor, and I said, what if we did partial homeschool? So just in the last 6 weeks, my 13-year-old checks out of school every other day for half the day. And
Mm.
this has been really awesome because I've been wanting to support him in entrepreneurship, but at the same time, I have to be realistic about my time that I can commit, that I can actually be present with him to help him with that while also not getting behind and stressed out on the things that I have to take care of. And so this has worked out great. So the last couple of weeks, him and I get together every other day for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And he started building an online skateboarding apparel brand. And so the first couple of weeks, we focused on who's your avatar, who's your ideal buyer, what are you going to sell? Then we started going through and going, okay, how do we find a white label drop shipper? What is a white label drop shipper? Do you want to build your own inventory? Things like this. And he's now to the point where he's finished building all his designs for his apparel. We launched a website, connected it to the drop shipper, and now we're getting into marketing. So now he has his product ready, and now we're going to start teaching him about marketing, and he's building a full-fledged apparel brand. It's
So
been really cool.
how much of this is he doing? Are you standing over his shoulder? Are you saying, hey, let me plug this in here? What does that look like when you're coaching him through this?
So he does it, and so he's in the driver's seat, and I'm just sitting behind him. And so like day one in his case, we can't start building apparel and designs until he understands how the ecosystem of selling online works. So the first day
Right.
or two was, here are the options, here's the pros and cons. And so of course I have an idea of which one will be more effective and easier. And it doesn't sound like a great idea for a 13-year-old to invest tens of thousands of dollars in inventory and put it in storage. But I still explain to him so he can understand the difference. So I don't want to just give him the answers. I want him to understand what the options are. And then
Right.
hopefully the answer will reveal itself. So we go through and we're like, here's our options. You can buy inventory, get a relationship with a manufacturer, take the risk and front the capital. Or we can go through a drop shipper, and here's what a drop shipper is. We find somebody that white labels it.
Mhm.
You have no money up front, less risk, but you have fixed profit margins and things like that. I educate them on the ecosystem first. And then after that, it's okay, now let's go find a drop shipper that does this. So then we spend a day looking at who sells what products and which of those products align with the type of products he wants to sell. So he's a skater kid, and so he wants to sell skateboarding types of products. And so we have to go look at what drop shippers sell those. Then that means a process of elimination, where it's okay, we don't want that drop shipper because we're not selling coffee mugs. And we don't want that drop shipper because he's focusing on boys' youth products. And so that one's adults or it's women's products. And so then we identify 2 or 3 options, and then we go, okay, let's look at which ones ship international, which ones have flexible profit margins, which ones can you customize the color of your logos. And so we finally narrowed it down to one that had the best options. And that's cool. Now you get to start learning Photoshop, because now you need to start building your designs. And so then I taught him Photoshop. And then after he learned Photoshop and learned how to create designs, then he did different version colors of his logo, because if his logo's dark, that'll go well on a white hoodie, but it won't go well on a black hoodie. So now he needs to learn how to invert the colors. And so it's just step by step helping him understand that this is a giant puzzle. And then here's how all the puzzle pieces connect. So I'm trying to do it in an ascension path where he can understand why the next thing is related to what we just completed. And so now that he understands the ecosystem, has a drop shipper chosen, knows why he chose that drop shipper, built all the products, selected all the products, added all the logos, added the logo variations, now he can get into creating market awareness. And so this opens up another potential path in this conversation, because as we're focusing on how do you build market awareness, then it's okay, we need to create videos about the products, or in this case where his audience is people that skateboard, we're going to create skateboarding tutorials and FAQs. But then I'm hypersensitive about my kids' privacy. So now we're having discussions of at what point does he have autonomy to disclose his identity? Because historically, I talk about my kids all the time, but I never show identifiable pictures. I don't disclose their names. So it's at
Right.
what point do we start to have that gray area? And so it's been an evolving kind of thing, but it's where we're at now.
What an like the coolest thing. I think back to my own experience. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I was homeschooled. About half of my K through 12 academia was homeschool. And I'm fortunate. I always got really lucky because my parents they didn't really know what to do with me. So they said, just go read a lot of books, which ended up
Mm,
being the best thing that I could possibly do. But I think it would have been so cool to have had that kind of just someone right there with me, like literally side by side building something. He's now leagues ahead of everybody, right? And that's just such a huge advantage. And it's not like you told him this stuff, because that's helpful too, right? You could tell him, hey, here's what I did, here's how I did it. But you like made him sit and probably do the keystrokes himself, right? That is viable skills. And I just think I think that's such an awesome way to go about it. One of my big questions is, let's say he just kills it, right? Let's say he's just pulling in tons of money. Maybe that's relative for someone his age, but he's pulling in 10K a month. And how do you plan to deal with that? And I guess the reason I'm asking that question specifically is because I made a lot of money as a young teenager.
mhm.
And I had this feast or famine mentality. I'll go make a bunch of money. Then I was like, well, I'm good. I don't need to, why would I keep pushing this forward if I'm just already crushing it? And I already made more money than all my friends. I'm already richer than everybody. I can buy everything that I want. So do you have any ideas on that, on how you plan to sort that part
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, I got some general ideas. Plus, I have another frame of reference. Just before we jumped on, I was on Zoom with my wife's nephew. He's 22, and I've been
Mhm.
mentoring him for 3 years. And so I get to see him advancing in the position. So I'll give you context on him and then tie it back to my kids. So he's 22. When he was 18, 19, I remember it was the Christmas, his last year of high school. And so he went to my wife at some point during a Christmas party and said, I graduate high school this year and I don't know what I want to do. My parents want me to go to college, but I don't know if I want to. And
Mhm.
so he, like many people, college is just assumed to go to because that's just a default, right? Not
Right.
to say it's good or bad, but you're not really told why, or you don't have an intent. It's just what you do. And so he was hesitant. I don't know if I should or shouldn't. And so it wasn't, he didn't not want to, he just didn't understand. He didn't have a goal if he did. And so
Mhm.
my wife said, well, why don't you talk to Damon? And so he asked me, and I said, well, why don't we go to lunch? And so we went to lunch a couple weeks later, and I said, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'll tell you the pros and cons of all these different choices, and then you can decide. So we talked about college, we talked about entrepreneurship, and then he came back a week or so later and said, I think I want to give entrepreneurship a try.
Hmm.
And then he says, so I said, okay, now you need to figure out what path in entrepreneurship. And he comes back a day or two later and he says, I want to do what you do. And I said, okay, you can't, I wanted to make sure he wasn't just taking the easy answers or the ones that were just closest to him. And I
Right.
said, why do you want to do that? And he says, well, you make good money, you have freedom of time, and I see that you have a good relationship with your family. And I said, okay, if you're going to do website marketing, you can't do that until you understand how websites work. So you first need to learn how to build them. And so I told him, spend the next 6 months to a year learning about web design. He had zero experience.
Mhm.
And so I pointed him to certain things to look up, like WordPress is a really big platform and there's lots of tutorials on it. So I said, why don't you start there? So he started self-teaching him and learning just through YouTube videos. And when he knew the basics, I said, now go start selling websites for free. And so what I meant by that was just be transparent when you reach out. Go connect with people on LinkedIn, go to local businesses and say, I'm fresh out of high school. I'm pursuing entrepreneurship. I know basic web design, but I just want to improve my skill set. So I will do what the equivalent of a $1,500 website is for free if you just allow me the opportunity to learn. So he started
Mm.
building websites for free. And I said, do that until you feel confident enough that you could say, I'm going to build a $1,500 website for $500 instead of free. Because as soon as you start to exchange money, there's different expectations. And
Right.
so when you set those expectations, why they're getting a good deal, then they're not wondering what the catch is. And then a lot
Mhm.
of them are also excited because they're helping a young kid.
Right.
So he started doing that, started making money. Fast forward a year, and now he's charging full price for websites. And I said, okay, now do the same thing with the marketing side. Go offer people to have websites that you're going to do their marketing, but you're going to do it for free because you want the experience. And then he repeated that. Then he started charging a little bit. Now he charges full prices. So 3 years later, he's 22 and he makes $10,000 a month and quit his day job about 4 months ago.
No way.
I
That's
can give
awesome.
that as a reference of with my kids. My kid's so much younger. My oldest is only 13. And so I've thought about a lot of things. Ultimately, you go to school, whether it's you go to K through 12 to learn basic life skills. And then if you go to college, it's ultimately to create an opportunity to try and have a better career. So if you have a career already looking promising, then you don't have to go to college. And so in my example, I went to college and I dropped out a semester before I got my degree because I had my agency starting to be successful. And ultimately it's, do you invest time and money into college for the hopeful upside of opportunity. But if the opportunity is already there, then you don't have to continue to invest time and money. So
Right.
when I think about my kids' opportunities, there's been a lot of people I've talked about the base, and I tend to agree, is if my kid figures out a way to make $100,000 a year reoccurring, he can drop out of school. Now, I don't know that I'd let him do that before like 16 or something, but when he's in high school age, I don't think I'd be opposed to it because ultimately that's where all of that is going, is to learn enough life skills to have financial stability. And I think entrepreneurship is one of the best things you can do for self-discovery. So if he's going through the path of entrepreneurship, finds financial stability, and he goes through all the trials and errors and self-discovery of entrepreneurship, I think he's ultimately going to be off in a better position.
Yeah, no, that makes quite a bit of sense. So if another scenario, let's say that he says, you know what, like I made $100,000 this year. I'm just going to go and really get into surfing and pursue a different hobby. Would that be at all a red flag to you? Or do you be like, oh no, that's acceptable? I feel like a
No,
lot
I
of
think
young entrepreneurs sometimes get a little spendy with their money. They can get into the consumer culture and go, oh, I've got all this money. I can go show off now. Other ones don't. But what are your thoughts?
I don't think I'd let him spend his money.
Okay.
As much as I want to give my kids autonomy, I also don't want them, like we've briefly touched on, I don't want them being spoiled. And I also don't
Right.
want them being unrealistic. I'll give you a good example. So, I try to really avoid buying materialistic things for my kids. Of course, I will for Christmas and birthdays and every once in a while, but they certainly don't get anything they ask for. Now, my
Hmm.
wife has a little bit harder time saying no. And
Right.
so the other day, as of the time we're recording this, Easter's coming up. And it's been a recurring thing the last couple of years where I'm like, babe, Easter is not Christmas. Stop spending so much money on their Easter presents. And so it came to a head again this year because we had already spent like hundreds of dollars. Now, half of it is for the season pass for a local amusement park. And so that alone was like $150. So if we ignore that, then it's get him an Easter basket, get him some treats, get him a couple of clothes, and maybe one fun thing. But we're spending like hundreds of dollars per kid, which sounds so unrealistic to me, especially from where I grew up. And
Right.
just in general, it sounds outrageous. And I'm like, we can't be setting these expectations for my kids. And our older son needs clothes because he's growing. And so I'm always trying to explain the difference between needs, experiences, and wants. And so needs, if my kids need clothes, they're going to get clothes. Now, I will spend, where I'll spend my money is on experiences. So my kids love soccer. My two boys are in competition soccer teams. So we flew to Florida to watch our home team, Real Salt Lake, play Inter Miami,
Mm.
who has a player, Messi, that my kids love.
Yeah.
So that was an experience. We get to see our home team play their favorite player in Florida. And while we're there, we buy jerseys, and the jerseys, like it was like $1,000 for 5 jerseys and a couple things. It was dumb expensive, right? That's something my kids are always going to remember.
Right.
Then back to the Easter thing, we got all their things bought, and I'm like, okay, babe, you need no more, right? We're good. And then my son wanted some shirt and it was like $80.
Hmm.
And I'm like, why did you buy him that shirt? Because he wanted it. And and I'm like, that doesn't justify, if he needs a shirt, go buy him a shirt. But he doesn't get the $80 shirts just because he wants it.
Right.
So it's this gray area where it's like, can you effectively define wants versus needs versus experience? Anyways, I'm rambling. Back to how the kids spend the money. If he's making $100,000 a year at the age of, we'll say 14,
Hmm.
well, at least half of that's gone into savings and he has no choice, right?
Right.
I want him to spend his money that he earned. And so if he wants to be done with his money, then the faster he learns that lesson, the better. So I'm not
Right.
opposed to him making really poor choices, just not with the majority of the money.
Yeah. And there's also something to be said, and this, and I'll share a little bit about myself, but I started washing windows at about 11. And same as you, I mean, I came from a big family. There wasn't a lot of money to go around. And so it was like if I wanted anything, I needed to go out and wash windows. And I was making more money than anyone that I knew, but I was blowing it as it came in. Just, oh my gosh, I
Mm-hmm.
get to do all the stuff my friends get to do. And I get to go to the movies now. I'd go to Lagoon and had all these cool things I could do finally. And this is where I think I agree with you. I wish that my parents had no regrets this way, but in a perfect world, I think if my parents had stepped in and said, hey, no, like we need to get you, for lack of a better word, addicted to the idea of turning your income back and making your money work for you.
Mm-hmm.
If it was, hey, take half your cash and we're going to go put it somewhere that returns revenue on its own, that's a little bit of an animal that you're like, oh my gosh, like why would okay, I could buy this really nice car, but if you already seen the money that comes in passively, it's almost a bit of an addiction, right? You're like,
Mm-hmm.
why would I buy that expensive a car if I could just put it over here and make it work for me? You see the money differently. You no longer see it as a consumer. You see it as material, but you see it as an opportunity or an experience or education. And yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's where I'm looking. I don't have kids yet, but I'm looking to the future going, okay, I hope that I'm decently successful by the time I do have kids, and I want to start them on the right path of thinking about money, not as just buying a cool new pair of sneakers, right?
Yeah, you have to get that itch out of your system though. Everybody knows that you can have money compound and earn interest, but until you make a poor choice and see the tangible
Hmm.
interest, it doesn't matter. I've told my kids countless times. And so the way that you try to help them see that is a couple ways. One is expose them, like you said, expose them to the concept of investments and compounding interest. And so there's these really cool apps. And so I had my kids download these. They're mock stock market apps. And so you start with $10,000 in fake money, but it
Hmm.
actually follows the market. And so if you pick an Apple
I've seen those.
stock,
Yeah.
it'll follow if you go up or down. And so then the kids can see my kid's fake stock portfolio just crushes my real one. And I can show them like pick the companies that you know and think do cool things and then just let it sit there. And what was interesting is when we first did these stock apps, like the first 3 days, they just lost like crazy. And I said, this kind of sucks, right? I said, but I don't want you to touch it. Just watch this for a minute. Just leave it in there. Okay. And then a week later, it just skyrocketed. And so that was so valuable for them to see the risk and the loss too, but the
Hmm.
value and patience. And then their $10,000 went to $16,000 in just a couple of weeks. It was crazy. So you expose them to that. And then as much as it's hard to see your kids waste money, I still let them waste their money. Like they get the money from birthdays and things like that because it's important for them to see it creates an opportunity for me when they're throwing the toy away 6 weeks later that's either broken or they don't use. And they said, was that worth your $30? So they
Hmm.
can start to see the long-term value and the things or the lack of it and the things they put it in. So I let them waste their money as much as annoying as it
Sure.
is, because it's like I can teach them it, that their little short-term losses now, if they can see it, are going to be long-term gains later. So I
Yeah.
expose them to that. And there's a really great book too that my investment guy gave me a long time ago when we first had our first kid. And it's called Three Cups. And it's about these parents that give their son, I can't remember, it was like 10th birthday, 8th birthday, something like that. And they give him 3 coffee mugs. And the kid's, what is this? Those are just out of the cupboard. And they're like, no, these are going to take you on an adventure. And the 1 cup's for spending, one's for savings, and one's for charity. And so they have their kids split every dollar they get up into thirds. And then it walks through the journey of this kid, of spending. He can hang out with his friends and do cool things. And then the charity is every once in a while they go give it to somebody. And so you see the reward in helping other people. And then the other one is savings. And so by the time he's 16, he buys his own car. And so that was a really cool book. And we did that for a while. I've not followed through consistently at even distributions of their thirds. But the concept, the seed has been planted of charity and savings. And so my kids have separate savings accounts. And what's funny is my 2 boys are now in a competition. So when my 9-year-old got $400 in savings over the years, big brother couldn't have his little brother have more than him. So then when his birthday rolled around, he put the majority of his birthday money into savings. And so now they both have $400, $500, $600 in their savings. And they haven't touched it. They've been leaving it. And I've been showing them the interest. They'll get 5-6 cents a month. And I'll go, look, this is cool. Leave it in there. So you just got to expose them to things. And it's just like you asked about, am I punching the keys or is he when he's learning things? Like you have to let them, you have to expose them to the things, but also let them trip over them themselves. You can't protect them. They're not going to learn from what you say. They're going to learn from what they experience.
No, totally. Yeah, that's super solid. Yeah, I am very grateful that I was given the chance. And like I said, I wish my parents had maybe helped direct me a little bit. They didn't know though at the time, right? Our financial literacy was not great. And so they didn't really know how to direct me. But yeah, you're right. Like I burned through stupid amounts of cash so many times, right? Oh, I saved up 10 grand now. I'm going to go try it on this crazy, just completely non-viable idea and just boom, gone. And that happened more times than I care to admit. But you learn, right? When you burn through cash and all of a sudden you're like, okay. And that's now when my buddies approach me with ideas. I'm like, oh yeah, I've done that specifically what you're talking about. And I can promise you it doesn't work that way. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Damon, I told you about 20 or 30 minutes. We'd sit and chat. I think maybe what we'll do, let's go ahead and maybe wrap this one up. If you're open to it, maybe another time in the future, can we jump into the SEO side of it and whatever else? I like to keep my episodes about 20, 30 minutes and also not take up too much of your time. But I think that was just rock solid.
Yeah.
It was rock solid content there. So yeah. Is there anything, so if people do want to contact you or maybe just pick your brain about whatever, is there a good way to go about doing that?
You can just go to damonburton.com. It has all my social media handles on there and different ways you can get a hold of me.
Awesome. Damon, thanks for coming and chatting with us. Thank you for listening to another episode. I'm so grateful for your support. If anything on this show was valuable to you, I have one huge ask. That's just share it with your friends. And if you have a little extra time, go ahead and leave me a review. That's my big ask for you guys. We'll see you on the next episode.